The Power Hour is on the air, live streaming you on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and Twitch. I'm your host, Michael Bishop, and thank you for joining us on this Monday evening. It's great to get everybody into the show. Getting to everything, we got a jam-packed show for you tonight. We've got a lot of topics to discuss, but first, let's get to our special guest real quick. Joining us from Titan Size is one of their great contributors. I'd like to introduce my guest tonight, Max Greenberg. Max, welcome to the Power Hour.
What's up? Thank you for having me on, Michael. I really appreciate it.
Very glad to have you on, man. Got a lot of great topics tonight. Got a lot of great things to cover. But first, definitely wanted to give a shout out to you and just make sure you just tell the listeners, especially you've got a article that came out today out on Titan Size.
It did. Yep. And talks about how I believe we stack up in the AFC South. I'm not going to talk about it a ton. You guys should go check it out if you haven't already.
The man does some great job writing. I should know. I get to read it every day, and I'm glad I get to work alongside him. So, Max Greenberg, thank you for once again joining us on the show.
Thank you for having me.
And once again, everybody is piling into the show. It's great to see everybody. Once again, welcome to the Power Hour. Go ahead and get some of our comments real quick. And it says, from Titan E, I see him being the second cornerback and Fulton is number one.
And I assume he's Farley.
I would assume as well. And
yes.
Really, I mean, that's a fair debate, and we're definitely going to have that as we go along throughout the night. So it's a long segment. We'll try and break it down piece by piece. And MCDE also says him and Fulton can be very dangerous.
I agree.
And I also agree. I really feel in this kind of situation, we know we're going to have to try and basically throw him out in the water and hope that he swims this year.
We had the same kind of thing happen with Fulton last year. We didn't know what he was going to be, and he came in and was a great contributor from day one.
And an excellent point. I mean, really, we felt that this is going to be a sink or swim year for Fulton as well. And he basically went out and did his job for the best that he could. Yeah. Unfortunately, did get hurt a little bit, and that did kind of put a damper on things. But hey, along those lines, we're trying to see what we've got with our players and try and elevate them to the next level.
Absolutely.
Well, Max, what do you say we go ahead and jump into this top news real quick? There's a lot of great topics tonight, so let's get into it.
Let's do it.
Welcoming everybody to the Power Hour. I'm your host, Michael Bishop. Joining me with Max Greenberg.
Yep.
Let's get into it. See, if we make mistakes, it's all good.
Oh, yeah.
All right, well, jumping into it, Max, we'll get to our first story of interest. And basically, the San Francisco 49ers have been talking to the Seattle Seahawks. Potentially, maybe a trade might be on the table. So what would be the moving narrative to get this to actually be from going to talks to becoming a reality?
I mean, first of all, I think it's all going to depend on how his shoulder's doing. Isn't that really one of the main things that's holding up the trade in these past few months, that his shoulder surgery is? I mean, they expect him to be ready for week one, but I guess it's one of those things where they don't really know completely.
At the moment right now, from what his agent has been saying, and it's come out today, that he's on schedule to be ready for the season opener. So at this moment, it looks like things are going as planned.
I mean, the thing about, especially going on the Seahawks, we know Garoppolo is, how limited he is, and that he struggled in the past to get teams over the top. I mean, yeah, he got the Niners to the NFC Championship last year, but a lot of that was due to how bad the Cowboys were and the Packers were in that game. And you could make an argument where the last interception he threw against the Rams that sealed the game was, there was just a bad interception. And especially going on a team like the Seahawks, that is pretty bad to begin with. I mean, I honestly see him at this point, maybe taking him from 3 wins to maybe 6. I mean, they're still going to be a really bad team, even if they get him.
But you rarely see these kind of trades happen, especially in the division with division rivals. And the last one I can come off just the memory that this actually happened would be when the Buffalo Bills and the New England Patriots traded Drew Bledsoe straight up back in 2003. So going with that narrative, I mean, unless the Seahawks feel like that they're getting a great value here and the 49ers are really just trying to get the Lance Smith era kicked off, what's it going to take to potentially make this a real scenario?
I mean, I think maybe the Niners we really don't know what the Niners are doing and if they're really wanting to get value out of Garoppolo. My guess is if they're going to trade him within the division, it's not going to be much for the Seahawks. They're going to have to give up. I assume it's going to be for pennies on the dollar, kind of similar to what Baker Mayfield just was fetched for the other day for a conditional 5th rounder. I bet it would be something like maybe a little more, but I don't see the Seahawks giving up much. I don't think the Seahawks are going to want to help their division rival. I think the Niners, they're just probably looking to see what they can get at this point because they know they want to start Trey Lance. So, yeah, I would think that if it's going to happen, it's going to be the Niners are definitely going to have to settle on the return.
Now, this really being the first report that we've heard, a team really just having a lot of interest in Garoppolo, especially once the summer months have just started. Along those lines, what surprise team do you think could potentially come out and maybe start asking questions? Is there any team that you think Garoppolo would fit in well with if a team would be willing to give him that opportunity?
Man, I really don't know. And I'm kind of surprised the Seahawks are interested in him because for a team that just traded Russell Wilson, they're going to go through a rebuild. It's going to take a few years. I mean, I honestly don't see what he, I kind of said it. I don't know what he really offers to that team besides a few more wins. And we saw reports that the Seahawks were interested previously in Baker Mayfield, yet those never came to fruition. And I think those rumors were also debunked from some sources. So I honestly don't really know where else he would fit. I think it's kind of the same thing with Baker Mayfield, where that I guess part of the reason he wasn't being traded for months was because, well, number one, the Browns and them being the Browns really depressed his value to the point where no one wanted to do him a favor. At the same time, though, there wasn't really a spot where you could go in the NFL and thought that Baker Mayfield really, really fit besides the Panthers, which happened the other day. But now the Panthers have made a move, and yeah, I don't really know what team would be out there that would really, really want him at this point.
And you bring up the Browns, and they're in a very interesting situation. They won't be on the hook for that Deshaun Watson contract really until next year. So if the Browns really wanted to, they could potentially take a one-year flyer.
The question with that is how much are they willing to give up because they give their first rounder for this year. They don't have their first rounder for 2 more years. They're not going to give up a first for Garoppolo. But how much are they willing to part with? Because it wasn't just the first rounders they parted with in that trade.
And that's a good point. But along the lines with Garoppolo, I think, especially with a major shoulder injury and the surgery basically going the way it is, I would have to assume that Cleveland would part with maybe a 3rd round pick. Do you think that might be something that could?
I think that could be.
But really, along the lines, I do find the narrative interesting. You know, you have 2 division foes willing to make potentially a trade that could come down maybe sometime, maybe before the end of the month. I'm sure it's just a kick the tires scenario, but at this point, how realistic do you think that this trade could come to fruition, just on a percentage scale?
I mean, I don't give it a great chance, but I mean, if the Seahawks are looking for an upgrade, Garoppolo is certainly better than anyone that's currently in their room right now. So if they're really serious about, you know, getting someone better than Drew Lock or Geno Smith, then they probably got to make this trade happen. But I would say it's about 35-65.
And that's good figures right there. I mean, honestly, at this point, I'd go maybe 45%. I think there is interest, but I do believe in the long term of things, Seattle's going to try and be in the Bryce Young or CJ Stroud competition to try and get that first draft pick.
They're actually my pick to get the number 1 pick this year.
So, I mean, really along those lines, they could take a rental. I wouldn't be surprised if they've signed him maybe for a 1-year deal, just to try and see if they can get any kind of scenario where they can actually win some games. But what would be the better option for Seattle?
I mean, me personally, and I honestly think they're better off just trying to rebuild and start from scratch. And when I say rebuild, I'm not saying they should tank, because we've seen in sports, you know, how tanking hasn't worked at times. You know, we saw the Dolphins several years ago when they came out and said they were going to tank for Tua. Of course, they still got Tua, but they could have had Joe Burrow if they. I'm not saying they should have tried to lose all those games. But the point is, you know, just tanking doesn't work all the time, and you know, just because you're rebuilding doesn't mean you shouldn't try and go out there and win all these games, because it's still, from a culture perspective, you want to go out there and still win. You don't go out on a given Sunday or whenever you play your game to lose games. You know, you want to go out and win. But at the same time, for a team like the Seahawks that's rebuilding, it's not necessarily about the record. It's about, setting a new foundation and showing improvement throughout the year. And also maybe a thing they're thinking about in this trade is if they still want to get something out of DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett, because they're still on that roster. And they probably, especially Lockett, he probably wants to get a few more good years in his prime because he doesn't have very long. So I don't know. I'd honestly say in terms of whether they should do it, I think it's completely 50-50.
And with the rebuild basically coming, you would have to think that Pete Carroll, would he be involved in this going forward? Do you think that a move like this would just say that he's trying to basically be on board, or do you think Pete Carroll's days might be numbered in Seattle?
I mean, I honestly thought his days would have been numbered even last year with how bad they did, and he's obviously still there. I honestly don't know how much of the bearing this year has on his job because the team's already expected to be really bad. So, but I guess if they get Garoppolo and they still win about 2 games, then maybe you do start to call his job into question, because that team with those receivers, even though they're going to be bad, they should still win more than 2 games with Garoppolo, Metcalf, and Tyler Lockett, and then Rashad Penny and Kenneth Walker.
And really, with Carroll, I feel that he's kind of in a Mike Shanahan situation. I feel, yes, he's been to 2 Super Bowls, he's won 1, but even when Shanahan won 2, he had a little bit of a longer leash, but eventually ended up getting fired in Denver. So I have to think along those lines, Carroll's kind of in the same boat right now. And maybe that this year might be a situation where ownership looks and asks themselves, is Pete Carroll really the best coach long term? I mean, especially with a good slew of coaches that could be potential free agents. And I mean, you do have Sean Payton out there still.
Yeah, I mean, again, it's all. I think the team as is constructed, there's only so high of a ceiling. So I guess unless the team just looks totally out of whack, which they did last year, even when Russell Wilson was in, I would have thought. Honestly, my thought on that question is if there was a time to fire him, it would have been last year. But the fact that they haven't, at least makes me think that they're not going to take this year that seriously in terms of his job security. I think they're going to give him 1 more year at least, unless they get Garoppolo and they're still really, really, really that bad.
Jimmy Garoppolo has definitely gained some interest as we've gone throughout the offseason. Will he end up a Seattle Seahawk? Only time will tell.
Yep.
Moving on to our next piece. And it appears that once again, the NFL might be coming up with a decision with Sunday NFL Ticket for 2023. As their contract runs out with DirecTV, apparently 3 suitors potentially have arisen, and the NFL is taking bids, and we could potentially have an answer maybe before the end of the month. So, Max, within this situation, who do you think is the best candidate out of the 3 right now that could take over the Sunday Ticket lineup?
I think it's got to be Prime Video, because we're seeing Prime. Aren't they doing Thursday Night Football now?
They are.
Yeah, and they've been, and I don't know how much else they've really been involved with, but I know that they're going to be in on Thursday Night Football, and then I mean this. I don't know about this too much extensively, but I feel like if they're going to go with Disney, then they might as well make it an ESPN thing, because Disney owns ESPN. So I think it could be. I honestly don't know which way it's going to go, but I honestly think Prime Video, just based on the fact they own Thursday Night Football, it has a really good chance. This is not a topic I know a ton about, but just for the fact that Prime Video owns Thursday Night Football now makes me believe that they could be a candidate to take over Sunday Ticket.
And really, each 3 candidate has vast experience in streaming. I would give the upper hand to Prime Video and even Disney at this point, just for having a more exclusive library.
And they also have ties with the NFL.
True. But the one thing that I do think with Prime Video is it just seems like that there's going to be more team openings in the next 4 to 5 years. And I just think along the lines that Jeff Bezos, with the money that he has, would want to get in the NFL, and more than likely they would let him in. I don't see that being a problem. The thing I do see being a problem, could this potentially be a conflict of interest with him owning a team and also having television rights with his network?
I mean, you never really know. I mean, a lot of these, I mean, even though they're not in the same leagues, a lot of these millionaires own different teams across all sports. So I don't know. I think, again, but one of those things is I think it all comes down to what makes him more money, and if it makes him more money, then I think he's going to do it.
And just from a fan standpoint, what would you like to see with this new package that NFL Sunday Ticket would offer? What would be more enticing for you to actually go out and buy this?
Well, to answer that question completely honestly, the one thing that really would make me buy this, and without second thought, was being in a location where I couldn't see the Titans play just on live TV on cable. Because when I've been in college the past 4 years, and last year I actually bought Sunday Ticket so I could watch the Titans without legally streaming the games. But now I'm home and I actually have Titan season tickets this year, so I'll be at the home games, and the away games I'll be able to watch on either cable or YouTube TV. So me personally, I don't have much of an incentive to buy it. I might still, but that's to answer that question. That for me personally, that decision is more motivated by whether I can view the Titans, and I'll be able to do that this year without paying any extra money than I already have.
And really, that's the name of the game. It's all about money. The NFL is trying to find the best company that they know will help them bring in more revenue on a more positive basis. DirecTV did an all right job with what they had, but at this point in a streaming world, you have to go with a better option. And me personally, I think Prime would be the best way to go. So to finish off this one, who do you think out of the three will end up getting the winning bid?
I think it's going to be Prime Video.
Amazon Prime keeps booming, and the NFL is right on the coattail of it. Will they get it for sure?
I honestly don't know for sure how it's going to work with Thursday Night Football next year, but I guess we'll find out.
And it definitely brings up, once again, could it be a conflict of interest? I don't know. Also moving forward in the news today, it appears that Dwayne Brown, the free agent from the Seattle Seahawks, has been arrested and charged with gun possession at LAX. And really, this was a crazy story that came out basically last couple of days. Max, along the lines of that, I mean, it just seems like a really cut and dry story here, but just the anomaly of it's just the fact that someone would walk in LAX with a firearm, even without any ammunition in it. You would have to think in one of the biggest airports in the world, that's probably not going to be a good idea.
And hasn't Dwayne Brown been known as a guy who's like a really good dude too? Like, this is surprising for him, of all people, at least from what I've heard about him.
It really is. I mean, basically, this is a player that's went through most of his career keeping his nose clean. You know, he's been a very solid piece for the Seattle Seahawks for the last 5 years. And I mean, there's been discussions that they'd like to bring him back just on a cheaper salary. But I would have to think that this scenario right here might put a little damper on things. Do you think it'll help or hinder him in any way?
I mean, I think that in his age, what's he now, like 36 or something like that?
He's in his 30s.
He's not. Yeah, he's certainly in his mid 30s. But as far as him as a player has been throughout his career, he's been a model of consistency. He was on the Texans. Before that, he was really good for them, and then they decided to trade him when Bill O'Brien was still on the team. Thank you for all your moves. I figured give Bill O'Brien a shout out. But anyway, but yeah, Dwayne Brown, even when he went to the Seahawks, even as he's aged, he's been really good. But now with this news and him already being as old as he is, we see players a lot of times get signed right before the season starts. The Titans did that with Davion Clown years ago, and that didn't go so well. But we see players. The point I'm trying to make is, if he was that desired of a commodity at this point, he'd probably be on a team. And now with this news, who knows? His career might just be over.
And that is a possibility, but at the same time, anybody that's lacking on an offensive line could potentially use him, especially if it's just a 1-year rental. So I would have to think any team that could be contending would be a good spot for him. I mean, potentially you could look at teams like the Dallas Cowboys that are very thin on the offensive line.
I don't know how he would translate to guard because he's played tackle like his entire career, but the Titans have a clear mystery. We don't know who's going to play left guard. It could be Jamarco Jones. It could be Aaron Brewer, neither of whom have proven to be starting quality at all. So, I mean, I don't know how he would translate to guard, but I figure, I mean, the transition from tackle to guard would certainly be easier than the other way around, and you don't need to be a huge expert to know that. So I don't know if he'd certainly be a good depth option on a lot of teams. It'd certainly be worth a 1-year flyer, but I guess nothing much happened on this front until this whole thing resolves itself.
And that's what'll basically happen. We will wait and see what happens with the situation with Brown. More than likely, he'll be charged, but we'll have to just give it the old wait and see situation, as we always do on this show. And it was announced basically last week that 54 semifinalists were added to the NFL Pro Football Hall of Fame list that could potentially be a part of the 2023 class. And joining in that list are some very illustrious names in the senior category. We have Ken Anderson, you have Roger Craig, Billy White Shoes Anderson, and Sterling Sharp, even in this list. But you would also have to add the contributors and coaches, which also you have a very interesting list adding up, where you have Bud Adams, you have Robert Kraft, Mike Holmgren, and even Mike Shanahan on that list. So, Max, really out of the names that I've listed, who's the most intriguing and could potentially be added in on that class this year?
I'll be honest, my knowledge of the NFL does not stretch that extensively back into like the early 90s or whenever these players, or even early thousands when these players and coaches were really active. You know, the one name that really jumps out to me from that list is Bud Adams, and we know him from being the longtime owner of the Oilers, then the Titans when they moved to Nashville. But I'll be honest, there's not. I don't know how well I can answer that question, to be honest.
Well, that's understandable. I mean, I'll talk about a few of them, and we'll just walk through them together. I think the best one that most people know is Robert Kraft of the New England Patriots, owning them. And I would have to consider the fact that he basically bought this team for basically peanuts and built it into one of the top 5 NFL franchises in the world. That he would definitely be one of the guys you would consider being a first-year entry.
Right. Yeah, he's like I guess he's the one who's on that list again, that like who's active today besides Kraft.
Mike Holmgren would probably be also in that category as a contributor, but more likely he'll go in as a coach.
Yeah.
And
in terms of legacy, Kraft definitely has to be the top one there.
From the standpoint of success, I would say Bud Adams will be right behind him. And as you said, owner of the Oilers, Tennessee Titans, and also co-founder of the AFL. I would basically see it doesn't make sense Lamar Hunt's in the Hall of Fame and Bud Adams is not.
Yeah, no, you're right.
But another player of interest would be Billy White Shoes Johnson of the Houston Texans. Very great return specialist, but unfortunately just one of those players that just could never get over the hump. Very well could potentially be one of those guys that might have a chance to make it in as one of the senior nominees.
And these would be 2023 nominees, you said, right?
That's correct.
Okay. Yeah. You know, definitely the one I guess that jumps out to me if I had to say anything would be Robert Kraft in terms, you know, the legacy in terms of, you know, obviously he's built a Super Bowl contender on the Patriots for, I mean, they're not now, but they obviously won a ton with Brady and Belichick. And, you know, you could always say, you know, it's Brady and Belichick who were responsible for the success, but, you know, it's on Kraft to put the guys in the proper place. And, you know, I guess a key decision that he made with that, and I guess I don't really know for sure how responsibility and role assignments are delegated within the Patriots organization, but you know, something to be said for the fact that it's on Kraft to make sure that Belichick was the GM and head coach, and for that a team like that, it wouldn't have worked out any other way because Belichick had to get his players, and like it or not, Belichick's still a key reason why the Patriots were so successful for so many years. So, and you know, Kraft's one of the best owners in the history of football and sports, and the Patriots' success in the 2000s has shown it.
And very great points there. I would also add Kraft really just basically picked along the lines from the Bill Parcells tree, especially having Bill Parcells there in the mid 90s. So basically, the Patriots had built a very steady, successful lineage that basically, with the addition of Tom Brady and Bill Belichick, cemented their legacy in football. So I don't have a problem with Robert Kraft getting in first year. It's just along those lines, I think eventually these owners and these contributors do get in. I do have to think Bud Adams has to have serious consideration, especially with his AFL ties.
I definitely think Bud Adams would be up there had to be up there too, based on what we've discussed here and what I know about him from his time with the Titans and Oilers.
We'll get to know a little bit more about this situation as the summer unfolds, but it will be interesting to say the least. And finally, in our breaking news, it appears that Heinz Field is no more. The Pittsburgh Steelers' illustrious name stadium has now been sold out to a more adult private equity insurance claimer, as Acrisure Stadium is now the name of the former Heinz Field. And I'll just let you take it from here. What were your thoughts on the renaming?
Well, it's certainly going to take some time getting used to. That's for sure. Heinz Field that's all I've definitely known. I think it's pretty much all anyone's known it since it's existed. I honestly don't know if it had any other previous names when it was in its very beginning. But I guess like all things, it's all about making money, and if they can get more money by having their stadium named under this sponsor, it can be better for them. Like all things, it's going to take a little bit to get used to, but once we do get used to, I guess we'll just notice the norm. So I guess things change, and this is the perfect example.
And I mean, for most of us, when the stadium did open back in 2001, Heinz Field, it just seemed like the perfect fit, especially with the relationships where Heinz products had basically been in Pittsburgh. So it was a perfect marriage. So I can understand a lot of just disappointed Pittsburgh Steelers fans coming from that perspective. I mean, along those lines, it's when Tennessee had Adelphia Coliseum. The name just fits so well. So,
and then it was LP Field and then Nissan.
I can honestly say I wasn't a fan of LP Field. It just sounded so generic to me.
Even like for me saying how it's tough to get used to some switches, Nissan Stadium just sounded better, honestly.
It did. And I know I've had a lot of people on the show, and we've even discussed in some terms, like some people would like to see Coliseum returned back to the namesake just because it has that more Greek/Roman feel.
Yeah, well, that's not going to happen now that apparently Titans are getting a new stadium here in a few years, which I'll say on that, whenever it's gone, I'm going to miss Nissan Stadium. I honestly like the layout of the stadium. It's a nice place, and it's all Titans fans have ever really known. But if it's going to put Nashville on the map more and it's going to be a nicer stadium, then we'll like it just fine.
But with you being on here, what is one thing you would like to see with the new stadium to help it improve more and get them on the map?
Well, it's certainly got to go up to modern standards. I think definitely Nashville has in mind with getting they have a Super Bowl in mind. They're going to want to host a Final Four. They're definitely going to want to host more college football events. So the one thing I was surprised about that I heard, and I don't know how much you heard about this, apparently it's supposed to be even smaller than Nissan Stadium currently holds, which I guess I've heard in the past, the Super Bowl, they want at least 70,000 seats in the stadium, but I guess if they don't care about that, they don't care about it that much. And I guess they're not going to take this game day experience away, because it's part of the Super Bowl is having the game day experience, and Nashville is a great place for that. We saw just how well the draft did. So, another thing I'm also kind of bummed about, which I don't know how much this matters because the weather in Tennessee kind of makes this not matter that much, but I was surprised when I saw apparently the stadium is going to be like a closed dome stadium and not retractable. I really wanted to see a stadium that can be open and closed both.
And I know a lot of fans that do feel the same way as you do, but I mean, from my perspective, it just seems like it's really a waste of money because how many times throughout the season do they really open the dome in most of the areas that do have it? I mean,
And the
especially
thing with
when
Tennessee is in like September, you're in the sun, you're getting drenched in sweat, and then November and December, it's just too cold. October be really the only time you would open it, and the Titans have, and just this year, the Titans only have one home game in October.
I mean, just in my experience, especially the way some of these are built on these stadiums that are just open doors, especially if you look at Mercedes-Benz Stadium in Atlanta, it just seems it's more for looks.
Yeah, that was the one where it's like it's weird because the retractable part of the dome, it's like if you have like the whole roof here, it's like this much is retractable. It makes no sense.
So you get an unnecessary amount of light in there, especially if it's an afternoon game. And that's definitely not easy on a player, especially if
Yeah,
they're trying to get down the
the
field.
shadows would be bad.
So along those lines, I'm fine if it's closed. I'm fine if it's open. It's just nice the fact that Tennessee is progressing forward and potentially getting a stadium that, like you said, will add revenue and add events that generally avoid open air stadiums.
And with all that comes more prestige and putting Nashville on a map as one of these cities. Nashville's been progressing a lot in the past few years, and I think getting a new stadium that could serve a lot of events such as Final Four and a lot of high-end college football games would really help us in that way.
Agreed. Especially knowing that we've seen Houston, Atlanta, and even Indianapolis host some of these events.
Yep.
So hopefully Tennessee can get on board and move along with that. But as for old Heinz Field, RIP, I guess.
Yeah, but they'll live with it.
As long as they win. So I guess we'll see what Kenny Pickett can do in the long term. All right, guys, we're going to take a quick 30-second break, and when we come back, we're going to break down our thoughts on Caleb Farley, what he'll need to do to be successful this year, and can he be the guy to elevate this team? I'm Michael Bishop with the Power Hour, and we'll be back in 30 seconds. The Power Hour is on the air, live streaming you on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and Twitch. I'm your host, Michael Bishop, and thank you for joining me on this Monday evening. Joining us tonight from Titanside, Max Greenberg. Max, it's great to have you on the show tonight, and we're getting a lot of great insight. I want to give you a chance to shout out to the fans and let them know where to find you on all of your social media platforms.
Yeah, so the main one you probably want to look me up on is Twitter. My handle is Max Greenberg 176, and has a link to all the accounts, like the platforms I contribute on. I'm a writer at Titansides, as Michael said. I'm also a writer for Predlines, which is the fan-sided website for the Nashville Predators here in the town of Nashville. So I'm a writer for both fan-sided websites here in Nashville. So yeah, that's basically what I do.
And definitely a modest writer at that. One of the very strong-minded writers in the biz. I enjoy a lot of his work. And if you haven't checked it out, check it out at titansize.com. It's on the Fansize Network. Max is always putting in some great stories and great insight.
Yep.
And once in a while, I do too.
Yeah, and I just want to come in today, as we said at the beginning of the episode, so definitely go check that out.
Yes, please. Check out Max's work and check out my work when I definitely get it out there. And don't forget, guys, if you love the show, help it grow. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Twitch, and TikTok at The Power 615. As you saw in the commercial, we're going to have a Madden tournament coming up at August 15th. I'll get you more information as we get further down to that. Real excited about that. So hopefully it's going to be a great game this year. Right. If you're going to have Madden on the cover, you better have a damn good game in place.
Oh, yeah.
Well, all right, Max, let's go ahead and jump into our next segment. As we know, Caleb Farley is one of the key puzzle pieces this year for the defense. as the same thing as we talked about earlier, Christian Fulton was kind of in the same boat. So right now, this year, it seems to be Caleb Farley's turn in the spotlight.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, it's going to certainly be interesting to see what happens. Him definitely coming off that ACL injury, it's not good for his development. When you're rookie year, and when I remember the only game he started, as a matter of fact, was against the Bills. And the one thing I really stood out to me from that game was I thought he was really whiffing on open field tackles, and that's something he's going to really have to improve on when he comes back this year. But all reports in the past few months have been positive. Mike Vrabel and John Robinson have gone out of their way multiple times to say really good things about him. That's not something those two do a lot. I even remember I saw in one of the interviews, Mike Vrabel even stopped one of the reporters and was talking about Caleb Farley. And they talked about also how he's changing his body now. He's a lot bigger, taller, stronger, which that certainly goes a long way to preventing injuries, especially ligament, like non-contact injuries that the one he suffered, and just a lot of injuries in general. But one thing we do know for sure is the talent's there. If you watch his film from Virginia Tech, which if you haven't, you definitely should go do that. But this guy has tools to succeed at the NFL level. He's really physical, and even for only having played the position 2 years, you would think he's done it his whole career. He's that talented. And even for as unproven as he is, I would say he's one of, if not the most talented corner the Titans have ever had in their existence. Maybe that might be a little bit of a stretch, but at least more talented than most cornerbacks I've ever seen. He's more talented than Christian Fulton, and Fulton himself had a really good year. So, it's going to take a lot for Farley to put it all together. The injury definitely has probably held him back over the past few months. That's what rehab always does, especially when you're a young player and you're developing. But but the Titans also last year, they were saying the same thing about Christian Fulton. They were really impressed by him. He turned out to be really good. And of course, he's an unknown, but there's a chance he could be a really good player. And if he's really as good as advertised, the Titans secondary could take another level, because we already have one of the better safety duos in the league with Kevin Byard and Amani Hooker. And Elijah Molden, he played pretty well last year, especially as the year progressed. He got more comfortable as a slot corner. And I really believe if Farley can be that guy, guy that we can see as a quality starting corner in the NFL, that would just about complete the Titans defense. Because if you look at this defense, pretty much everyone's returning. The whole front four is returning. Landry, Simmons, Autry, and Dupree, they're all coming back. Zach Cunningham and David Long, they're coming back. And as I mentioned, everyone in the secondary, the only change that's being made is Farley's going to be, or we presume is going to be taking the spot of Jackrabbit Jenkins. And if he can be that upgrade, and this Titans defense really might put it together as one of the very best in the NFL. And they already were a really good unit last year, and that stepped up to really win the Titans a lot of games.
And basically, it's the missing puzzle piece the Titans need to help shore up a defense that's already playing at a very high level. Yeah. I say high level, but I won't say elite yet, because the secondary at times was suspect in some instances.
You're right. Allowed a lot of yards, but didn't allow a lot of points, though.
And of course, the biggest thing that people are concerned about is his injury history, and that is just mind-boggling, the fact that this kid has just tore his body up in the college level.
Yeah.
So the biggest concern going forward is he's already had 2 ACL tears in his career, and the back surgery was the big red flag. This was the one that basically turned so many teams away from him. I mean, when it first came to fruition in that draft, who was the one player you were going for when people were saying that Farley was probably going to be the guy that Tennessee ended up with in a lot of these mock drafts?
And it certainly changed over time. Going back to 2021, it certainly changed over time. But once we cut Adoree Jackson and Malcolm Butler, and I honestly was shocked that either one of them was cut, to be honest. But the fact that both of them were cut made me think that we really had to go for a corner, because Fulton at the time was an unknown. We knew Jackrabbit Jenkins was a quick fix at best. And I personally thought at the time it was going to be Greg Newsome. Even with the injury, I did not think Farley was going to fall that far. I thought somebody would take a chance on that talent. But once I realized he did fall to us, I really did want us to take a shot. The health was always going to be concerned, but it's one of those things where if the talent's there, at some point it's too good to not take a chance. Titans did the same thing with Jeffrey Simmons when he tore his ACL before the combine. His draft stock took a huge hit. They took a chance on him, and he's turned out to be one of the best defensive tackles in the NFL. And when the pick was made, I really liked it. He hasn't backed it up. Of course, he got injured again. And, we hear the reports that he's changing his body, but, it's up to him also to he's got to make sure he can actually stay healthy. And if he can do that, then I think that we've got a really special player.
And I'll be honest, I mean, when the draft came out, I was all Kwity Paye. I was all about Kwity Paye in this draft. And really, I just felt at that position, it was just very, very risky to go after a player with such huge red flags, especially a spinal injury, where it could have potentially just ended his career right there. So it was a huge gamble at that point. And even after the pick, I was willing to give him the benefit of the doubt, because when you bring in guys like this, you want to see him succeed. And I'm not going to be petty about it. I did feel that in the right system, he could succeed. And of course, Tennessee has a good defense. They've got already good pieces. But
I think that he doesn't have to go in and be like the best. Like, certainly want to be an upgrade over Jackrabbit Jenkins, but we already know what Fulton can bring in. Also, a stat I saw from No Flags Film. If you don't follow No Flags Film, do that. Go follow him on Twitter. He puts out some really great content. He also has a YouTube channel that's really good. But anyway, he put in a stat about Fulton where, if you look, there was one of the metrics that showed that he was one of the that based on that metric at least, he was a top 5 corner. And I'm not going to sit here and argue Christian Fulton's a top 5 corner in the league. I'm not going to do that. But based on that metric, you could go out there and say, this guy's a really good corner. And when you saw him play, it was a guy that was actually really good. And we saw in the first 2 weeks, even the game against Arizona, where nobody played particularly well, he looked good doing what he was doing. And the next week in Seattle, he went and held DK Metcalf to a pretty below average game compared to DK Metcalf standards, at least at the time. And right then, we knew that Fulton was going to be a pretty good corner, was going to be a quite good corner in this league. He's very technically sound, and I think it definitely is going to take some pressure off of Farley in terms of being, that guy. Like, we don't get me wrong, he's a first-round pick, and we expect good things from him. But the pressure is off at least a little, to where if he's at least an upgrade over Jackrabbit Jenkins, it's a huge help to the defense.
And the wild thing was, I mean, especially when this draft was coming to fruition, he was one of the top 3 corners from a lot of analysts. He was either one between 4.
I thought he had a case to be the best one. Surtain. Actually, no, it was J.C. Horn who went first. But I thought it was going to be for sure between Farley and Surtain. I thought Farley was really that good, and if he didn't have that injury concern, there was a very real chance that he was going to be a top 10 pick in the draft.
And the kid only played 2 years. Yeah. I mean, one year he missed complete to injury, and the other one was to COVID. So the fact that you had a guy out here that was basically in the 1, 2, 3 selections of the top cornerbacks in this draft is just mind-blowing.
And I think another thing that could help him in the NFL is that, keep in mind, this guy is a convert from receiver to corner. So in terms of knowing what it takes to be good at the receiver level and knowing what the receivers are going to do against him, he knows, because he's been there before. Not at the NFL level, of course. And did he play receiver in college? I honestly don't know.
He did play receiver. They converted him over to cornerback.
Really? It was in college when that happened. Okay. So yeah, so in terms of knowing what receivers are going to bring against them, he definitely has a lot of knowledge, maybe even more than some guys in the NFL do.
I mean, along the lines, even in high school, he was just purely an athlete. So he had played multiple positions. Virginia Tech just didn't know what to do with him at the time.
Yeah. And once they locked him in to corner, he was outstanding.
And basically, it's going to boil down, in my idea, to basically 3 keys to him to be successful. And of course, the first one is the obvious one, and it's health.
Right.
I mean, what do we say in this league? The best ability is availability,
Right.
as
Yep.
corny as it is, but it's still the truth.
It is the truth.
So, and it's really going to be a tough slate starting out. He's going to be tested right out of the gate.
Yep.
So I think the Giants game would be a good warm up for him. And I'm not going to overlook the Giants. No one should overlook anybody. We've learned that the hard way. But I think the real big first test is going to be against the Buffalo Bills at Buffalo. And, of course, that was the game he got hurt in last year.
And it's going to be interesting to see how the Titans use that matchup because, as a defense, you're the one who really dictates those matchups. So I assume we're going to see Fulton go against the number one receivers on opposing teams. And I think going up against number two corners, against number two receivers is going to be a good warm up for Farley to see, maybe not warm up, but it's going to be a good test of just to see what he has and see just how well he can match up with these guys in the NFL who he's really never played against before, at least not more than that one game against Buffalo that we mentioned earlier, where, like I said, he struggled, but hopefully he's learned a lot from that and has taken time to perfect his craft just as much as he's been allowed to since his rehab, which I don't really know how far along he is, but he's reached a point where it's been 9 months since the injury, so he should be close, if not pretty much done.
And already getting raved at by Coach Vrabel at this point.
Oh, yeah.
He looks a lot more bigger. He looks a lot more physical in some of the practices we have seen him in. Though limited, it's very eye-catching at this point.
He's a hard worker, and certainly seems like it.
And as you were saying, the one-on-one matchups this year, that's going to be key to his success. So throughout the schedule, what do you think's one matchup you would like to see him play against where you would like to measure how well he could actually be at this point in his career?
That's hard. I think I didn't really think of it in terms of like matchups. I think I guess weeks 2 and 3, it's going to be tough because going against the Bills, they have Stephon Diggs, and then the Raiders now having Devontae Adams, and they also have Hunter Renfrow, who's more of a slot guy, but still, the Titans are not going to be playing their shortage of receivers, and even who are I guess the Giants have. I really do think week 1 is a good matchup for him, at least to start off with, because the Giants, they have decent receivers, but nothing like amazing. They drafted Wan'Dale Robinson this year. They have Sterling Shepard. Kenny Galladay they have, and he's also a wild card because he didn't play well last year at all, and he's still on that team. So I think so. I guess if Farley is the one who's going up against God, I forgot his name again. I just said it. Kenny Galladay. That could be a decent matchup because you got two pretty much unknowns against each other. It's going to be interesting to see how the Titans match up with the receivers that week because you got Galladay and Sterling Shepard, who I assume are going to play, and then Kadarius Toney and Wan'Dale Robinson, who are mainly slot guys. So it's going to be interesting to see how the Giants, who they play when and how the Titans match up. Because again, as a defense, you're the one who dictates those matchups.
And they will be very intriguing matchups. And getting to our final point and our third key to success, he has to be the guy that helps elevate the secondary. Yeah. I mean, you've already got 3 players, potentially 4, that are making this team a whole lot better in terms of successful. But Tennessee is basically at that really good level. I want to see him get to the elite level.
Right.
And Caleb Farley is that guy that could help do that.
Yeah. And if he lives up to that first-round pedigree, then there's a really good chance he does because, like I said, there is no doubting his talent. The talent is clearly there. He has to put it all together. And I guess the first few weeks, maybe he might struggle a little bit, but mainly I really want to see progression as the year goes on, because that's truly a sign of how you're learning and how you're adapting and getting better. And it certainly seems like he's learning and at least putting in the work as far as all that's concerned. The coaches are saying good things. He seems to have that figured out, but it's a lot different putting in the work versus actually going on the field and executing.
So, with all these being said and all our points being made, what, in your opinion, would be a successful year for Caleb Farley? What numbers would he have to put up in order to be deemed a success?
Well, especially with corners, numbers are a weird thing because we saw with Trayvon Diggs last year, him getting 11 interceptions or whatever it was. But there's also the other stat was that he was, in terms of how many yards he gave up, he was getting torched the entire year. And it goes one thing I was saying as that year was going on, and one thing I always say, when you get like 11 interceptions or however many, like really a high number, that's not always the greatest sign because it shows that quarterbacks are not always scared to throw it your way. And for Farley, I just want to see him get the ball thrown his way less and less and less and less, because you see guys like Jalen Ramsey, those guys like that are the best corners in the league because they hardly get thrown to. And I'm not saying Caleb Farley has to be on the level of like a top 5 corner, because that's a pretty lofty expectation after coming off an injury, essentially playing his first year in the league. Let's not even count the one game he played last year. It was literally one game he was playing. I just want to see him progress and hopefully not get targeted less and less and less and less as the year goes on.
The key thing for me is if Farley can go out and make the job easier for the safeties, then really that's what's going to make the difference. He doesn't have to be a ball hawk. He doesn't have to be a guy that goes out there and dominates. He just needs to be a guy that's consistent.
Yeah, he doesn't really ball hawk. That's not his strong suit. He needs to just be a guy that you can go out there and just put him on that receiver and just let him stay there the whole game. And also another thing I want to say about this and the Titans defense in general, and Farley will certainly help out with that, is I wanted to get to a point where this defense doesn't always feel the need to always back up the corners several yards from the receivers. I know you have to mix up your looks as a defense from time to time, but I've seen way too many times in the past 2 years where the Titans always let their corners stand back from these receivers, because say you're the receivers and you run a slant play, you're going to gain 5 yards of play just about. And I want to see the Titans where they have the confidence to put Farley and Fulton, like press them on the receivers, because in the past few years, we as much as I complain about something like that, we have lacked those corners, especially back in 2020 when the defense was terrible. And I think Fulton could definitely be that guy and who could press a lot more, and Farley, and hopefully he gives the coaching staff a lot more confidence that they can do that more often.
And the fact that the defensive line has been the major strength for this team, it's just been so infuriating, especially the last couple of years, where the secondary's just underperformed. And it just seems like as much good as Byard and as much good as Hooker have done, that we've just been missing those key pieces right at the corner position.
Yeah, absolutely. But I certainly hope drafting corners, we've drafted Fulton, Elijah Molden, Farley, and now Roger McCreary, all in 3 years, all in the first 3 rounds. Farley's obviously a first-round pick. McCreary was really early in the second round. Fulton, I thought, should have been a first-rounder, although he slipped like the mid-second. And then you got Molden, who was a third-rounder. But then, in terms of how the NFL draft goes, all valued really, really highly. So you'd hope that if you're investing that much into the corner position, you're going to see results.
And hopefully that's the game plan that we see this year. So with all this being said and all our points being made on Farley and on the secondary, what is your basically expectations for this defense this year?
I will say this about the offense in 2021. We saw the offense in 2020 was really, really good. And we had about that same expectation, if not more, with the acquisition of Julio Jones last offseason. We expected the Titans offense to be one of the best in the league. And they obviously weren't due to injury and ineffectiveness with a lot of the unit. As far as this defense goes, I really hope that they can continue to maintain that high level. I'll say the one thing about this defense that's really different from the 2020 offense going on 2021 offense, and I actually wrote an article about this on Titan Size when I talked about the defense, is the defense has little to no turnover at all. When we saw the 2021 offense, there was a new offensive coordinator, which turned out to be pretty disastrous. There was we lost Corey Davis and replaced him with Julio, and Julio obviously couldn't stay healthy, and that turned out to be a downgrade. If that's nothing we would have seen coming at the time. Point is there, and then Henry's injury obviously happened. There was a lot of turnover, and that we didn't see really affecting that offense in 2021. But in the case of the defense, you have every starter returning except one, and the one starter that's not returning, we expect to be replaced with an upgrade. So I'm really hoping that this defense, and expecting, as long as this defense can stay healthy, I'm expecting them to be a really, really good unit. And like you said, the hope is we go from really good to elite. And I think if Farley can pan out, then I really think he can. And besides Farley, I think Bud Dupree's gonna have a much better year, because last year he was playing. He was playing noticeably injured a lot of the year because he hadn't really recovered from his ACL injury. And then I also, someone he wasn't hurt last year, but someone who I also think hasn't reached his ceiling yet potentially is Jeffrey Simmons. We've seen him putting in this work this summer, and the one part of his game that he's needed to work on is his pass rushing, and that took a step forward last year, and he's trying to play out even at a lighter weight this year, and he's been really working on his pass rushing a lot this offseason. We saw him at Von Miller's Pass Rush Academy because he knows he has to get better in that regard too. So if you can get improvements from Dupree, from Simmons, which we really don't need improvements from Simmons that much. He's already really, really, really good. I'd say he's an elite defensive tackle as it is. But if you get a better year from Dupree, which I think is going to happen, and you get the upgrade from Farley, which is a really good possibility, there's a really good chance this defense could crack that elite tier.
And that's what we're definitely hoping for this season. I would love it if this defense just cracked the top 5 in all the major categories.
And and keep in mind that the Titans last year had the number 1 ranked run defense. They had the number 1 ranked run defense last year, and they're returning everyone who was a part of that. Zach Cunningham, and I will say this: I personally been critical of Pro Football Focus. I think some of their evaluations of players are off, but Pro Football Focus ranked Zach Cunningham as number 1 run stuffer in the NFL. And when you saw him play last year, he was really good in that regard as a run stuffer for the Titans. So you got everyone who was a contributor to the number 1 run defense is coming back, and hopefully an upgrade in the secondary. And you never know, maybe even Amani Hooker could take a step forward. And Kevin Byard too is supposedly in the best shape of his life right now.
And health on all ends is going to be a big question. Jeffrey Simmons' contract is also going to be a situation we're going to continue to monitor.
If they don't pay him, oh god.
I do think he'll get paid. I think
I very much agree, but after the whole AJ Brown debacle, I am not going to speak on anything as if it's for sure.
Well, one thing that most people are very just not cool with is the fact that when you lose a receiver of the caliber that AJ Brown was, I'm more all right with that than losing Jeffrey Simmons.
I completely agree. And that's one thing I've talked to a lot of my friends about, friends who aren't big fans of the Titans, I remember especially one of my buddies was saying that you'd rather keep AJ than Jeff Simmons. And I was like, no, you'd rather keep Jeff Simmons. And one of my other friends who was a Titans fan was saying to me, I don't know how you view the situation, but he's like, I think paying Jeff Simmons is even more important than paying AJ. And I'm like, yeah, I completely agree, because in this NFL, you have to be able to generate a pass rush and win football in the trenches. And it's way easier to replace a number 1 receiver than it is to replace a guy like Jeff Simmons, who is the anchor of our defense. He's by far the best player on our defense. And our defense falls apart way more without Big Jeff than the Titans offense will fall apart without AJ Brown.
And really, I do love the fact that Tennessee's getting back to the tight end sets. I love the addition of Hooper. I love the addition of Chigokongwo. I think getting back to that, giving Tannehill true safety valves at that position will help the offense.
That's another thing that I didn't mention about the offense in 2021. Losing Jonnu Smith hurt a lot more than I or pretty much anyone else would have expected.
I really don't think anybody thought it was going to be that bad. I really felt that Farksworth could have been just a low maintenance kind of Todd Heat player, but that just never came to fruition.
I truly didn't give enough credit to how important his run blocking was in our offense, and his pass blocking at times too. I didn't give enough credit to how critical he really was to the Titans' offensive line.
And this year, it was definitely evident where we go out and bring in a potential replacement if Hooper can have a good year and try and elevate this team again at the tight end position. And Shiga Kongwo has had ravings in this offseason.
Both of them have been raved about too. People have talked a lot about how Hooper and Tannehill are really developing chemistry with each other.
And you definitely feel really good about that situation going forward. Absolutely. Knowing that this is going to be a really good year for us. And a shout out to Gary I. Banks Jr. One day the Tennessee Titans will win the Super Bowl. Gary, that's the dream. That's the dream.
If and when that happens, we will all be very, very happy. Of course.
Many tears will be shed, many beers will be drunken, and many cars will be flipped. I don't doubt it.
You probably you either really, really, really want to come to Broadway, or you really, really, really don't the day that happens.
Either way, I'll be there front and center no matter what.
Oh yeah, me too.
All right, guys, thank you for joining us on the show tonight. But before we go, I want to thank Max Greenberg from Titan Size for joining us, and I definitely want to make sure that he knows that we paid very close attention and read his article, and we loved it, and we're going to plug it out there, not just because we're on the site as well, but we're looking out for our guys too. Max does great work out there. He does great articles, and he gives great insight. Make sure you check that out. Max, definitely want to make sure you give a shout out to the fans, let them know where to find it, and let them know about the article.
Oh, yeah. And also, one thing I didn't mention about the way you can look at articles, and I think this works for a lot of different websites too. Like if you literally search Max Greenberg Titan Sized or like Max Greenberg Predlines, you can find my profiles for the articles I've written on both websites. And you can do the same for anyone who writes for either website. So definitely go check that out for all of the contributors.
And that's the key thing here. We want to make sure we get all the contributors, all the love they need out there. Max is definitely one of the best ones, giving out all that good insight. Don't forget to check it out at titansize.com on the Fanside Network. They cover all sports. They cover all teams. You got to check it out. But if you're a Titans fan, this is where you need to be.
Absolutely.
So once again, I want to thank Max for coming out here tonight and joining us on the show. We've had a fun time.
Absolutely.
And don't forget to check out his articles once again on titansize.com. And guys, don't forget, share the show. That's how we grow.
Definitely.
Don't forget to like us on Facebook, Twitter, Twitch, and TikTok at the Power 615. If you're watching on YouTube, just hit the little subscribe button on the bottom. It's right down there. It's red. It's little. It'll get you what you need. It'll get it done. Saves you trouble. That's what I'm about. Easy accessibility. So once again, I thank Max Greenberg for joining us on this show tonight. We'll definitely have to get you back on as the regular season starts because there's so much more news we've got to hit.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Everybody, once again, thank you for joining us on the show. I'm Michael Bishop with the Power Hour. Take care and tighten up.
See you guys.